This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosts Civil War reenactments, ATV rodeos, mud bogs, diesel truck pulls, and high school rodeo finals. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a welcome back to the dynamic duo from the greater Richmond area. You all have been guests before, and just great to have you on and have you on together. Delegate Jennifer McClellan, welcome back. Delegate Chris Peace. And eager to have you talk with our viewers about issues from the 2013 session, and then, if you wish, even look ahead to 2014. But starting with 2013, Jennifer, you'd start, and then Chris, and then you are welcome to ignore me and just have a conversation. I'll keep.
How can we do that,
I'll
David?
keep track of the time. Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Well, I think the two biggest issues that we faced were transportation funding and whether or not to expand Medicaid. And I think on both of them we ended up with a compromise that showed that we are a little bit better than Washington at coming together to solve problems. Neither one of those solutions were perfect, but I think moved the ball forward on both issues to address the needs of the Commonwealth. And those were sort of the biggies. There were a number of smaller issues. We sit on different committees, so I focus more on education issues, the governor's K-12 reform, and as well as had some bills myself. And there were bills put forward to address specific issues that constituents had raised in the education world. Also sit on commerce and labor. We looked at, we thought we were going to be looking at whether to lift the ban on uranium mining, but that kind of went away. And then on courts of justice, we looked at some judges and had a number of issues that came through that committee that we can go into more detail on if you want.
Okay.
And I'm on the Appropriations Committee, so from my perspective, Jennifer referenced Medicaid extension, which was just one piece of the budget process, the compromise on establishing the Medicaid Reform Commission to look at reforming the existing system, which is probably arguably on an unsustainable trajectory financially. It's the largest part of our discretionary budget in the state, but the budget itself and amendments to the two-year budget were a big deal. It includes funding from pretty much anything you can think of, from aid to localities to public safety to the healthcare spending that I referenced, and education. The dollars to the classroom are paramount. I represent half of Hanover County, and over the last several months, the Hanover education budget has taken top of the fold in most of the local newspapers and the shortfall that they were experiencing. And so we wanted to do some things in the budget to help ease that pressure locally by ending the reversion process that we had established under Governor Kane, where localities would pay the state back some monies. We ended that, and that'll result in a couple $100,000 at least to several of my counties, which comes at a good time while all the localities now are creating their own budgets. They have to wait for the state to get its business done, and then they can do their business. And again, it's another example, as Jennifer mentioned, of how we're different than Washington. They're debating now this continuing resolution whether to extend, if the government's going to shut down in Washington. We're now almost a month out, or a couple weeks out certainly, from session where we adopted our amendments to a budget. We have a budget, it's balanced. We're not printing money, we're not running up inflation like the federal government. We get our business done, then localities take the next step. But I'm very proud, as always, and work a lot with Jennifer on a number of other issues regionally, that we can communicate and dialogue across the aisle. And we're not always happy about the results. I did not support the final version of the transportation package, but I think we at least acknowledge that transportation is an issue. There is a problem, and everybody has a different way to solve that. I had a bill to create additional representation for the Richmond region on the CTB, which is the entity that designates the priorities for road funding. That got kind of gobbled up in this process where the governor's bill ultimately took precedent. But we're trying to find ways to solve transportation problems. But in the end, we dialogued. We had a result. We often disagree about whether it was the perfect result, but we're much different than Washington.
A 46-day session and adjourned on time.
Yes.
And
correct.
Some years it's an extra day or two, but short session and adjourned on time. Talking about some of the hot button issues, the uranium mining, the Capitol Police would tell us the figures of over 2,500 people came through the security into the General Assembly building on the day that the Senate was to consider that bill. So there's a great deal of interest in that bill as well as in others.
Absolutely. I think we've seen, particularly in the last 2 years, a lot more public participation in the process, which is good. And we've seen a lot more people come down either for a protest or to speak to us directly or to speak in the committees. A lot more in the last couple of years than in the 8 years that we've both been here.
I think a lot of that has to do with the internet and social media. Yeah. We are all dialoguing, not just in person across the aisle, but we actually have Twitter conversations on the floor between Delegate Keem. I know he posts a lot, Jennifer and I, and so you can actually read a delegate's mind, if you will, while you're on the floor just by what they're posting. But we're also sending those messages out into the community, and the community is responding. I think it's absolutely critical that people are participating in the process. Whenever we have guests here, I have them in a subcommittee conference room, because I can tell them that bills oftentimes really get their birth there. They're filed, they're put through the committee process, right? But at the same time, it's the most intimate of spaces. You have a working group of maybe 8 people around a conference table, and my neighbor could be standing next to me over my shoulder giving their input on a piece of legislation. That is exactly what kind of process we admire and respect, and we hope it continues.
So other legislation then that you'd want to mention?
Sure. I had sort of 3 that I really worked the hardest on. One was an 8-year journey that started with tragedy at the University of Richmond when Denora Hill was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, who had been stalking her. And that year, her friends called my office and said, we want something meaningful to come out of this meaningless act. And so we worked together with the Alliance Against Sexual Violence and discovered that we really needed to strengthen the penalties for stalking. At that time, we created a bill that would make it a felony after your 2nd conviction. Right now, it's only after your 3rd. It would also have made it a felony if you stalk someone in violation of a protective order. Back that first year, Catherine Waddell put the bill in because she represented the University of Richmond. It did not pass, but I picked up the mantle and have put it in every year. And it's one of those, no one disagreed with the policy, but anytime you create a new felony, there's a fiscal impact, and that just wasn't the priority each of those years. So this year, we took a little different tact. We narrowed the bill so that it would be a felony after your 2nd offense if you've already been convicted within the past 5 years of certain violent acts against the same victim, or if you have a protective order against you, or if you've been convicted of domestic assault. This gets at the people who stalking is more likely to lead to something more violent. And this year that bill passed, and so it's a bill that a lot of people had a hand in. It took a long time, but it kind of shows that if you don't succeed in 1 year, keep at it, and you'll get it done. And that one became really personal to me, because after Denora, we saw Yardley Love at UVA, we saw Tiffany Green here in the city of Richmond, and Tiffany's family in particular got really engaged in trying to help this bill become law. And now, I mean, even now, I almost get kind of choked up, because it's you don't want a tragedy to happen to have good public policy, but sometimes that's what you need to really keep you motivated to make sure that there aren't any more Tiffany Greens or Denora Hills or Yardley Loves. And so I'm really proud that we were able to get that one done.
Yeah, hold the others, and let's get
I
one
will.
from Chris. Then
Well, I was just going to say that there are so many core services of government. I mentioned the healthcare piece, the transportation piece, public safety, which relates to what Jennifer's describing, also takes on some other forms that you might not think of, not just your typical enhancing penalties for DUIs or that type of thing. We had the texting while driving primary offense legislation this year. Jennifer carried a bill that deals with bullying in school, I think is really important. When you think about crimes against children, through the budget, we funded about $31 million, I believe, at the end of the day for more school resource officers. In the wake of Newtown, Connecticut, there are several other bills that originated late in the session from the governor to look at school safety. There's the commission that's also looking at comprehensive issues related to school safety, very important. And you talk about crimes against children, crimes against women, in particular this stalking bill that Jennifer had, but we also had 3 or 4 pieces of legislation I was co-patron on dealing with human trafficking, which unfortunately seems to be on the rise. I don't know what explains it, but it's a real plague in our society, and so what we can do from a state level to deter and detract and crack down on these types of predators, I think we need to do it. So you had some very interesting issues out there dealing with public safety that people might not be picking up in the newspaper when you're talking about transportation or Medicaid or some of these big sort of macro level issues.
So what's another issue?
Well, there's Chris touched on the second one. I worked very hard on the bullying one, but then there's one. A lot of people assume that once Congress passes a bill that's it and nothing else has to happen to make it take effect. But I had a bill that grew out of the Jobs Act passed last year, which Senator Warner and Congressman Cantor really took the lead in getting that passed. One piece of that bill made it legal to invest in startup companies through online investments. And so we thought, well, since Virginia led the way in getting that done at the national level, let's figure out how we can jumpstart what's called crowdfunding, which is a new industry that has popped up to help invest in startups online. Crowdfunding. And so we looked at our code and decided, it's unclear whether any tax credits that you're eligible for now you could get if you give online, because online wasn't legal until January. So I had a bill that would make clear that any investment that you make online that would otherwise be eligible for a tax credit, you can still get the tax credit. And again, the idea is we have a brand new industry that is just getting started. Virginia led the way in making it legal. Let's lead the way and become sort of the crowdfunding capital of America. And so I was surprised how much attention it got. There are a lot of people interested in it, and hopefully we will kickstart that industry here.
So that would be July 1st.
Yes.
July 1st.
July
It'd be
1st.
law in Virginia.
Yep.
Interesting.
I want to just say that our constituents are very important to us for a lot of reasons, but they also give us a lot of good ideas.
Yes.
I know Jennifer put in a bill a couple of years ago somewhat related to the crowdfunding idea to create the benefit corporation, which I think is a fantastic idea when you're talking about how businesses can actually be profitable but also do good, the corporate social responsibility. Good constituent idea. in our area this past session. We had one person who had a problem with the tax department, had a little bill to correct that. Folks who create a lot of jobs in our district, lumbering and timbering properties. We're told that the cleanup requirement by the state was being assessed about $25,000 a pop because they use certain equipment. And so we had a bill to clarify the tax laws on that, which actually helps businesses and allows them to hire more people. But probably the number one issue in our area in terms of constituent outcry was the governor's proposal to toll 95. And we had, again, a bipartisan effort, a regional effort. It really got a lot of co-patrons from around the Commonwealth even to say that tolling of 95 was not a good idea for business. It was inhospitable when we're trying to invest money in tourism and recruit people to Virginia. And so we were able to, I had a bill, but ultimately the vehicle was the overall transportation funding package that Delegate Dance and I amended to prohibit tolling of 95 south of Fredericksburg. So it was a big deal for us and a major victory for the folks who spoke out in Hanover County and in New Kent and King William, elsewhere around the Metro Richmond region.
So now that the session is ended and we're in that somewhat limbo time before the reconvene, what are constituents contacting you about now? Are they contacting you about bills that are still before the governor? Are they focusing on 2014 this soon?
All of the above, really. I'm hearing from some who are interested in having the governor either amend or veto certain bills. In particular, I'm hearing a lot about the voter ID bills that passed this year. But then I've got constituents calling to talk about legislation for next year. We are all up for re-election, so we are talking to constituents about that. But I think, Chris kind of touched on how important public engagement is, and so we are also in the process. I call it the neighborhood association circuit. So, we are going out and telling folks what we did, because when we're in session, it's our lives. We were all consumed by it, but most people just vaguely know that we're there, but not necessarily when we finish or what we did. And so part of making sure they are engaged in the process is informing them of what we've done and getting their feedback on that. So I'm in the process. I'm sure Chris is doing the same thing. And then all year we deal with any issues that constituents have navigating through problems with state agencies, and that never stops. So I think all that's going on.
And not jumping ahead to 2014 necessarily,
Right.
because we've got a statewide election for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. Our side of the aisle is holding a convention in May, and that's coming up. And so there are sitting members of the legislature running for various posts. They're actually coming to our neighborhood association circuit as well, which is always interesting. We're happy to have them, and hopefully they hit a restaurant or two along the way and invest in our communities. But it is that limbo time. I think we're probably concerned, maybe is the wrong word, but interested in whether the governor's pen will amend any of our own legislation or veto a bill here and there, which this governor has been known to do as a lawyer, as a former legislator, as a former attorney general. I think he may be approaching records for amending bills, but we'll see what comes down the pike for the veto session in April.
Yes. So the season coming up, a very busy season with upcoming elections. One party has a primary, one party has a convention.
That's right.
The filing for people running for the House of Delegates, give them some information on
Yeah, we actually, March 11th is the first date that you can turn in your petitions with your declaration of candidacy to the legislative district chairman. You're required to have 125 registered voters sign your petition to run. So between March 11th and I believe it's March 28th, you can file to run in a primary for the House of Delegates. I've selected a primary for my nomination for the 97th district. And if you haven't selected a primary, if there's an open seat, for example, Delegate John Cox is not running in the other part of Hanover for re-election. He selected a primary, so it will be, if they're unable to generate a candidate for that primary, then that legislative district committee will decide on how that nomination will be handled beyond that window that I just described. So we have a little bit of a fluid situation, at least in Hanover, but otherwise I think Jennifer and I we're both intending to run for re-election. I've filed my paperwork already and moving forward to work with our statewide candidates for November.
So then the process starting in March, then terminates June 11th. Is that the final date where
Yeah, so
all candidates will be known?
yeah, so in the districts where primaries were not selected, then the district committees have until June 11th to determine who their nominee is going to be, using a caucus or whatever process they decide. They could do what's called a firehouse primary, which is really a caucus where they say on this day, come and file to see who the nominee is going to be. But all the candidates will be known by 5 p.m. on June 11th.
And for our viewers, if they haven't focused and if we haven't said it enough, June 11th is the date of the primary, and so that's the date while all others who are not having primaries are affected by that same deadline.
Right.
That same time it will be known. Now, you mentioned Delegate John Cox from Hanover. At the point that we're having the conversation, he's one among 6 of your colleagues who've announced that they're not running again. Mm-hmm. And you all were first elected in 2006. As you reflect on the years that you've been in, is that fairly typical that 4 or 5 or 6 people?
I think we're right around that number. The redistricting year or the year following redistricting, I think it tends to bump up a little bit because, people may not want to run in a completely new district or other reasons, or maybe 2 are together in a district, if you will. But I think we're right around the normal number. And most of the people who are retiring have served quite a long time, maybe choosing to do other things in their retirement. I think Bob Tate, who's been chairman of the Education Committee, has served here for over 25 years, I want to say. And Joe Johnson is close to about 25 years of service from Southwest Virginia. So you have a number of people who have served quite a long time, who just have other interests and want to enjoy life and give back to their communities in different ways.
And some of the others, I think a lot of people forget we're a part-time legislature. And so you do have to try to balance your family, your business life, or job. And so some of the younger in years members find that balance is just too difficult, that their time is better served either focusing more on family or business or sometimes just other opportunities come their way that are just too good to pass up. And so there is a good amount of just regular churn, which is why a lot of people ask, do you support term limits? And I think we kind of naturally have term limits, just in that over time either people find they need to move on or their constituents find they need to move on.
You're both elected in 2006, and what number in seniority are you right now?
She's senior to me.
Yeah, actually it was 2005.
5, elected in 5.
Elected in 5, but I am at 42 now.
I started at 100,
Right.
and I'm at 49, and with the 6, I think 1 is junior to me, so we'll move up a little bit more. It is a tenure-based process. Obviously, mm-hmm. There's some anomalies to that over time, but your committee ranking, moves up as people retire, as you serve longer. You build institutional knowledge, which I think can be a benefit, in particular when you have a part-time legislature. When people talk about Congress, full-time Congress, seniority matters there, but it matters in a different way than here. Coming in, I see even the most experienced, accomplished business people come in and then look at state government and, it's where do I start? And so it's really great to have the committee subject matter experience. I've served on HWI, Health Welfare Institutions, now for 8 years. And so I feel like I've built a little bit of knowledge about our health and human services in Virginia. Jennifer on education the whole time as well, and so knows K through 12 and higher ed backwards and forwards. So that's really important. When you come in and you're fresh and new, you don't have that. So.
Once more, our time has expired, and we thank each of you, Delegate Peace, Delegate McClellan, for being on This Week in Richmond and helping to inform our viewers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosts Civil War reenactments, ATV rodeos, mud bogs, diesel truck pulls, and high school rodeo finals. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.